Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, episode 118.
Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
This is Keith Parsons with Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, and today I have with me Jerry Olla. Oja. Well, it all depends on what country you're in, I guess. How do you say your last name, Jerry?
Don't worry, I've been called many worse things before, so I take no offense. I would go by Ola. That's the way I was raised, I guess.
Well, that is so much easier to say. I think Ferney's been influencing me.
He can have that effect on people, I've noticed.
That he does. Well, we had you on earlier, one of the first episodes of this relaunch. We happened to be in D.C. at the time. But today we wanted to talk about the little discussion, your presentation that you had at Wi-Fi Trek just a couple of weeks ago. And in the lead-in into the Wi-Fi Trek, there was the title was so intriguing. I was so excited to hear what you had to say about all your new tools. And then you talked about Sidekick, which, by the way, I love Sidekick. Sidekick's great. But I wanted to talk to you about other cool tools in addition to Sidekick. We've already done a whole episode on Sidekick alone, both at the launch and a separate one. So this one is less about Sidekick and Jerry, the solutions architect, but Jerry, the cool dude who knows all the cool tools. Can you bring that Jerry out today?
I can try. It's pretty hard to pull out that side of Jerry of all the gadgets and gizmos and stuff. No, I could. That's obviously a passion of mine is the gadgets, and especially when those gadgets tie into our daily daily work here with Wi-Fi. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about that.
Well, just so everyone knows, if anyone didn't know, Jerry is the architect, developer, organizer, contributor, I don't know what you'd call it, of making the Odroid image. So the one we use for WLPC, totally 100% comes from Jerry. So thank you very much, Jerry.
Yeah, equally thank you, Keith, for, making it a reality, right? It wouldn't be as mainstream as it is to, if you could call it that, as it is today, without your help of, making it scale.
Well, we have delivered many hundreds of those into the hands of wireless professionals. But what I want to talk about is just in Lisbon. We were in Lisbon a couple of weeks ago, and we delivered about 100 or so to the attendees there. They were running version 1.3. Not that 1.3 is wrong, but we are up to 1.5, and I don't even know if 1.6 is coming around the bend. So tell us some of the features that you've added since February WLPC, when we had 300 of them out there. Obviously, there's been some upgrades. What kind of upgrades did you come across?
Yeah, so really all this comes from the community, and that was really my whole kind of, I guess, envision and kind of dream behind this thing was, get these very versatile boxes into the hands of the professionals, right? And they're going to be able to say, hey, wouldn't it be great if it could do this and that? And, that's really what we've started to see happening now over the last year since we've, gotten hundreds of these into the hands of the professionals. So some of those features, are around the web-based speed test performance. So we've added some new HTML5 capabilities for throughput testing. So being able to run different types of tests that report and visualize the information differently. So one of the HTML5 tests will do a graphical graph out the speed test, so you can kind of see over time how stable that connection is, and maybe kind of change different things in the physical environment. So that was one of the, in my eyes, a big enhancement, and that came through. I believe that HTML5 speed test, the code for that, Nigel Bowden had discovered and worked perfectly with some very slight, very minimal modification needed to the code to make that run locally on the Odroid device. And then Sam Clemens, expanded upon that and suggested, hey, let's create some way of accessing these different types of tests easier. So then we created a web page that could access those different types of tests by just pulling up a web page on the Odroid through a browser.
And how that's really made it simpler to use. You just take the Odroid, plug it into Ethernet port, and then any client, iPhone, iPad, Android, tablet, desktop has a browser, and you just point it at the Odroid's IP address, and boop, up comes a little choice of things to test. So from an end user standpoint, it's almost like your own speedtest.net, but you can control it on your end. So it's really good for end users.
Yeah, exactly. And that was really the goal, right? So to try and mimic what we have and improve upon what what the typical user uses today is, they can just pull up any browser on their mobile device or the laptop and say, how's the Wi-Fi in quotes here, performing by going to speedtest.net, which, as professionals, we know that's not the true speed test, right? That's, a lot of other factors into there. And usually the bottleneck is more on the gateway or the internet connection there than the actual Wi-Fi. So if we want to test the true Wi-Fi speed, we need something that's a local endpoint on the network that, we can test the true either Wi-Fi or local networks, speed test and be able to then compare those, right? So now we can compare, okay, here's my local speed test, here's the speed test with the internet factored in, and see is there a bottleneck between the two.
I like it, and I've used it for that very reason. Well, in addition, some of the other things that are on the Odroid just right off the box, out of the box, you can just turn it on. It has iPerf 2, iPerf 3, and just a difference in ports. You point to the different port, and those two things come up. It has ePerf, and tell us a little bit about what ePerf. Why did Ekahau come up with an ePerf?
Yeah, and really honestly, thinking all the way back to when I first started this whole kind of coming up with a portable throughput testing device, that was the initial driving factor, was this whole ePerf concept, which is, the E stands for Ekahau. But essentially what it is we took the iPerf 3 code internally here at Ekahau and kind of optimize that, I guess you could say, for Wi-Fi throughput testing. And the issues with that is the traditional or native iPerf 3 code is not built initially for Wi-Fi throughput testing. It's built for TCP, UDP, but not specifically for Wi-Fi. And as we know with Wi-Fi, there's some other things that can go wrong with roaming and disconnects and things like that. So when you're trying to do a throughput test, that can break the server side. It's not really built for that, to sustain that. So what we did at Ekahau was wrap that in some Java that can withstand that and optimize that for Wi-Fi performance testing and not break the server if you roam or you get disconnected from the Wi-Fi while you're performing these tests.
So it's has some resiliency added to it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Well, I like that. So it has iPerf 2 and 3. It also has Zap. Zap is a open source now, but originally from Ruckus Test. I've used Zap for a long time. I like it because it takes a whole boatload, like 1,000 is the default that's in there right now, little teeny tests, and then lets you plot those over a curve called a CDF curve, a cumulative distribution function, kind of a statistical way of looking at a bell curve but stretched out another way. And the flatter the bell curve is, the more stable your connection is. Tools like just Zap as a command line tool works, but on iOS and Android, there's a SpeedFlex test that's available as well. So the third way to use Zap is a tool from Zaid Khalin. That if you have it, I think it's a fairly expensive $70, $80 tool, will graphically show those tests and runs on a Mac. It's called Wi-Fi Perf. So that's the main ones. What's the other thing that's just running standard when you just boot the Odroid up?
Well, along the lines of Zap too, my favorite piece of Zap is the ability to use Zap as a remote control for doing throughput tests. So if I want to say test the throughput between this phone and this this phone, or my phone and a laptop or something like that, I can execute that test remotely from my computer and say, okay, test between these two devices that are both running that SpeedFlex application, and we can actually see the throughput between those and measure the results at that, kind of remotely executed, which is, I think, pretty unique. I don't know of any other that you can really kind of remotely, execute that test, but you're not the one actually doing the test. You're executing the test between two different endpoints.
And that was kind of built in from Ruckus so that they could remotely, from a support standpoint, by the way, Zep also runs on all Ruckus APs all the time and controllers.
Yep.
So you could say, oh, test your client against your AP and give me the results. So unlike iPerf, where you have to be one of the two endpoints, Zap allows you to just be a third party and watch it.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So other things are in Odroid.
Yeah, other things in Odroid. So, some of the other things currently today would be the Wi-Fi access point piece of it. So we provided some of those Wi-Fi modules. So a USB-based, adapter similar to like your, adapter that you'd use for like a survey adapter with Ekahau. The Wi-Fi Module 5 is what they call it. The Odroid Wi-Fi Module 5 is an 802.11 AC adapter, and that can be placed either into like a monitor mode or into a AP mode. And if you put it into an AP mode, it essentially and that's the default is if you have the adapter plugged in, you power it on, it's automatically broadcasting a signal, and you can connect to the wireless to either control the Odroid device, using that as kind of like a management interface, or to use it as like a portable hotspot. So you could connect in like a wired Ethernet connection. And that's one of the things that we did update since the Wireless LAN Pros build in Phoenix last year was or I guess it would still be this year, but the 1.2 version, I think it was. We updated that to now have the access point start automatically, so there's no button or anything you need to push to get that started. And then it also has the firewall rules applied to be able to use that as a hotspot.
And if you're just in a hotel and you have an Ethernet port, you instantly just fire it up, and it's you, and you can have control and add a WPA pre-shared key or something if you'd like. So yeah. I like that feature. It also has a nice tie-in, and this is how I think I've bought way too many Odroids to have them as target servers. There was a picture that Blake Croney put on a little while ago of, he's got color-coded Odroids, and they put them on different segments of his network to test different things. What I like is a tie-in to Wi-Fi Explorer from Adrian Granados. That you can just use this as an endpoint, ship it out someplace, and all the features of Wi-Fi Explorer Pro are right there, remotely accessible. So how long did that take to add that feature by working with Adrian?
Oh, working with Adrian's been awesome. I'm glad you brought that up because, not only adding the Wi-Fi Explorer Pro sensor, he made it super simple of just, handing me some pre-built code that I didn't really have to do anything other than copy and paste for the most part. He helped me out extensively with, some of the most challenging pieces of the Odroid, if we want to talk about some of the challenges along the way, was getting the physical buttons. So on the Wireless LAN Pro build in Phoenix there, we added a screen that had 4 physical buttons on there. Well, those buttons, don't come from the factory, of course, pre-configured. We had to write all the code to actually make those buttons do something. And, I'm not a programmer, so that was well over my head. And I probably spent a solid 2 days trying to get those buttons to work. And finally, after banging my head against the wall, reached out to Adrian and said, hey, here's the code I'm working with. I can't even get this to compile. Here's the errors I'm getting. And I swear 5 minutes later, he sends me back some code and says, here, try this. And sure enough, it compiles, starts working, and worked with them a little further to tweak a few knobs, and got everything working, in no time at all. So yeah, Adrian's been a huge help in the whole process.
One more thing to thank Adrian for. That's good. I definitely like that. So I've seen you run some other things on your personal copy, like a Spectrum Analyzer. Are we going to see that possibly in a 1.6 or some upcoming version?
Yeah, that's true. I think I did add that in based on some feedback. I think that is now built into the 1.5 version. So yeah, the latest kind of build that is kind of been released and available, I guess you could say, has that into the GUI. So you can either run it from the touch screen that's on the WLPC build, or you could connect it to, let's say, like an external monitor through the HDMI port, and obviously have a much bigger display, much more useful view of that spectrum, and connect like one of the Medigate spectrum analyzers, either like the WiSpy 2.4 or the DBX. That build will support both versions.
And what's the command to do that? I mean, so you could hit the one button and jump into the LXD desktop?
Yeah.
From there, or is it? But you have to have a keyboard or something, or do you need to be SSH'd in?
Technically, you could do it all without a keyboard. You can use the touch screen. It's a very small screen, so you're going to want to have maybe some kind of a stylus or something, and it is a pretty small screen. But it technically it does work. I don't know if I would really say it's very useful on that small screen. But yeah, the other option would be doing like an SSH into the Odroid, and I've seen some people do this where you could start up like a VNC server, and the server is already on there. You just have to turn it on, fire up the VNC server, and you can do a remote desktop into the Odroid and get a much larger display than on your laptop, and be able to remotely view the spectrum analysis. So you could either have the Odroid deployed somewhere on a network, even in a different building on the network, or VPN into a network, and be able to view the spectrum remotely that way.
I mean, the combination of Odroid and an extra WiSpy is a fairly inexpensive spec AN. I mean, you don't have all the tools, but it does give you a little. We need to write that one up. That needs a nice little addition to our instruction kit. How about Wireshark capture? We have a USB NIC. We have Wi-Fi. We have a copy of Linux. Wireshark should be fairly simple. I haven't done it, so I don't know if it's that simple.
Yeah, that's something that I need to do some more work on. It is certainly possible to do with everything today. Wireshark technically is installed on there, so you could use the same process of doing like a VNC connection, having your adapter plugged in if you want to work in a GUI. Otherwise, also T-Shark was also added on there by request of Brian Long. I know he's our kind of packet analysis guru, along with like Peter McKenzie. So the adding that in there was intended for that purpose of if you need to be able to do like a remote packet capture. That's something I haven't personally spent a lot of time with, but that's something I know we've gotten a few requests on, is adding some more remote packet capture and potentially analysis capability on the Odroid itself.
Yeah, I like the idea. Maybe we can get some people who are listening to get involved. It's a community project. If you are excited, let's get on it. I saw on Slack today someone asked, how about patching for crack? We've got these Odroids around our network, and crack's a big, this week especially, people are kind of going a little crazy over it. What do you need to do to make sure that your Odroid is patched for crack?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was just noticing that conversation on Slack as well right before we started the podcast here. So, that's something I need to look into. It looks like, according to Blake, he's saying that that has already been patched in the host APD application that runs the access point on the Odroid. So it looks like we need to maybe push an update or run an update on the Odroid itself using like the package manager, which is apt-get. And you can update that either yourself or, we'll probably be pushing a new image here shortly, the 1.6 image with a few of these updates that we're talking about.
Yeah, one of the issues using an 8 gig EMCC, unlike the one we did in, the one we did in Budapest last year was a real pain because we kind of had to build it. By the time we got to Lisbon, they were all pre-canned, and it just, we built all of them. We assembled them all. We tested it. We learned from WLPC in February, getting 250 people to assemble a case. Just the case was way more difficult than I had assumed. We timed it a couple times, had it under 5-6 minutes, and 45 minutes in, there were many people still hadn't got their cases assembled. So thus we went to a fully assembled version, which lets you get directly into the doing experiments with the tool much, much faster. But the downside is once the case is assembled, getting access to the EMCC using Robert Boardman's 3D printed cases is kind of a pain. You got to take the whole back off, take the battery off. You don't have to take it all the way apart, but you can reach in and pull off the EMCC using the Etcher.io app. And thank you, Jerry, for that. It was way simple. not as fast as some other methods, but extremely simple to use. You just need to download the new, 1.6 or whatever the latest code is. Use Etcher, push it over, reboot, and you're good to go. So I think we've improved dramatically over the last year of how this Odroid has become an actual really useful tool. Other things. What are you working on outside of Odroid?
Outside of Odroid.
Gadgets. One, by the way, I just had to tell everyone, if you haven't seen it, Jerry's the guy who's got, Legos on the back of his laptop. So he's the Lego guy, and he's had a couple of different, Lego layouts. But the latest one has the colored Ekahau logo on it. So kudos to you for pulling that one off.
Got to keep up with the times,
Yeah, did your kids mind you stealing their little Lego bricks? Or did you keep those custom?
I had to go and purchase my own Legos this time. I couldn't keep taking from the kids' Lego supply. They wouldn't let me. They were defending those pretty good, so I had to go out and buy my own. But yeah, I feel like that's kind of become my reputation, right? The Lego / Odroid guy, which I guess I'm all right with. I could be known for worse things. So
yeah, that's not a bad place to go. But on the downside, you're also known for that Lego, and with Sidekick, you don't have those anymore.
That's right.
Maybe you put Lego on your Sidekick.
Yeah. Attach that to the back of my screen. Yeah,
I don't think the screen hinges could handle that.
Well, a couple other things I guess that I would say I'm working on as far as gadgets go. This obviously goes back to even WLPC was the other maker session we did with Ryan and Jake. Kind of got me hooked on the whole HackerF stuff. So I took that whole idea and seen, I'm all about, I guess, making things portable and battery powered. So I took the HackerF and found the PortaPack. And we did a podcast about this. If you haven't heard that one, I'll definitely give that one a listen.
Episode 102, something like that.
Yep. It's a great way to make some more use out of that awesome HackerF that we got at the Wireless LAN Pros conference, and put the PortaPack on there. It basically turns it into pretty much like a big iPod, the old school iPod with
the scroll
dial.
wheel. Yeah.
Yep. But it adds a touch screen and color and everything to it, and you take the same
battery. It's got a screen, right? And it has a screen. I mean, you don't have to SSH in anymore. The other thing I like about, by the way, just if anyone's listening, PortaPacks have been on allocation, been back ordered for months. And just a couple of weeks ago, they're now shipping. So you can get your PortaPack. It takes, 5 minutes tops to pull your HackerF apart, mount it inside the PortaPack. And the good part about PortaPack is it has its own firmware, but all you have to do is use the scroll wheel, go down and pick HackerF, and it'll run the stock firmware as well. So you can use it either way. And what do you run on PortaPack?
So actually, as of most recently, I've been having some fun with my kids tracking airplanes. So one of the things with the Havoc firmware is it has a ADS-B receiver mode, and you can actually pick up the transponders from airplanes and see their altitude and latitude, longitude coordinates, and be able to look up the call sign and everything for that airplane. So it's pretty fun to go outside with the kids and actually use it for some nice educational purposes that way.
It's and you put the big long antenna on because you've got to get a really low frequency.
Yeah, that one definitely picks up the most. That antenna that we got at WLPC works really nicely for that.
And then you got new little antennas. Every time I meet you, I have to go buy more stuff on Amazon. By the way, I did, and I have a couple of those. I don't know, what do you call them? They're kind of a helical, spiral-ish little.
They're the cloverleaf antenna, the circular polarized antenna.
Yeah, they're made for like racing drones.
Yeah.
But they work on the PortaPack very nicely, and they make you look cool. Okay, at least in my mind, they make you look cool. I'll have to put a picture on this podcast to show this cool little. It's kind of a cloverleaf. It makes it sound like it's a plant. It's more helical, spinny little. Yeah. Anyway, but they work. I've been using them now, and they work pretty good. Cool. By the way, do you know the difference between the 4-pedal and then like the 6-pedal version?
One is supposed to be for transmit, and one's supposed to be for receive, is my understanding. I believe the 4-pedal cloverleaf is the transmitter, but I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me on it.
Well, I've tried them both in small, just inside my lab. they don't seem to make any difference. They both work really well.
Yeah.
So Odroid, if you don't have one, you should, and we can help you get those. If you've come to WLPC in the last year, you've received one. We'll probably be having them within a couple of weeks on the Wireless LAN Pros store. We've got a bunch we assembled after the last conference. And upgrade, as soon as we get 1.6 from Mr. Jerry here, we will update that. You can play with it with a SpecAN. We'll patch it for a crack. It has HTML5 features. You can hit it from anywhere. iPerf 2, iPerf 3, Zap, uses an access point. And just big thanks, Jerry. You've done the community a big service by your hobby becoming something that we all can use.
Yeah, huge thanks to you, Keith, for making my dream a reality, I guess you could say.
Now it's everywhere. So much so that NetScout copied you and has a test accessory now it's a little smaller, you got to admit, but it only does iPerf 3, so it's a little limited. On the other hand, it has self-discovery from a G2, and we don't quite have that yet. Oh, by the way, I haven't tried it. I have to try this. Have you tried using a G2 against an Odroid?
I have not, but I believe somebody was saying that they did and that it worked with the G2. I think it might have been Sam, if I remember right.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. They're both iPerf 3 capable, so new experiment to add to the queue of the things to do in our labs. Well, I appreciate your time today, and we will catch you on another podcast in the future. Thanks, Jerry.
Thanks, Keith.
Wi-Fi question of the day with Lee Badman.
Well, Lee, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Matthew. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. So what Wi-Fi question of the day do you have for us today?
Well, recently I threw one out there to the community, kind of taking it in a non-technical direction, and I asked how important writing skills are to your day-to-day job, and the response was interesting. Certainly a mixed bag and a mixed variety of perspectives. Had a couple of people surprisingly said not at all. How they write, the quality of their writing skills is irrelevant to their work. Mm-hmm. Had another gentleman, maybe the most interesting answer I got out of all of them. His perspective was, well, good writers make bad engineers, and he seemed to think that maybe you couldn't.
Is that like a skinny cook? You can't trust a skinny cook kind of thing?
Yeah, I think so, exactly. If you're good at writing, you're going to be bad at math and sciences, I guess, was the thing. That's there. Funny. And another gentleman, no correlation whatsoever. Those all kind of surprised me, but probably overwhelmingly, I think the common thought was, it's a critical skill regardless of your role, whether you're in sales. We're all in sales, even if we're doing design. Sooner or later, we're selling something, even if it's our ideas. But regardless of what you do, the better you write and present yourself through the written word, most of the community seemed to think that was a pretty darn valuable skill. And I know for me, I am in that camp as well.
Very cool. Interesting insights. Thanks, Lee.
Sure.
Tools Review, where we review software, hardware, gadgets, and toys of interest to wireless LAN professionals.
Interviews with Ferney Munoz, and we're talking about something we've been developing for about a year now. We were involved in the beta of Ekahau Sidekick. We had access to some of the sizes and materials early on, and as it's finally been released now, we can talk about a product that we now have in stock. It's a product. It's produced. I've got a stack of them sitting here in front of me. What is this little thing here, Ferney? What's it for?
Okay, well,
go ahead and describe one.
Yes, it's going to be hard without a video, but it's very simple actually. If you guys haven't seen the Sidekick, that's a new product that has come about month ago or so.
Yeah, about a month now.
About a month ago. It looks like a large Discman. It's a device. It's
Or a small access point.
a small access point. Yeah, it's kind of in that range. People call it, this looks just like a Discman. It has some holes on the side to put straps on it, and it originally comes with a strap, but it also has one of these holes like to hold a camera.
I don't know what to call it other than a screw hole.
A screw hole, okay.
It's a hole that has a screw in it, and
yes.
It's the size of a tripod mount for the bottom of a camera.
Yes. So it has that device. So what we decided to do, of course, as we've always thinking of the needs of other wireless LAN professionals, we came up with a plate. I guess that's the best description I can give to it.
Yeah.
It's like a little plate. It's a flat device that it has a hole on the side to have the screw go through and hold the Sidekick. But what makes this plate, this holder, special is that it has the MOLLE system that we have used in the survey tray, we have used in the USB cases, the custom wireless LAN professionals USB
and
cases.
all the WLPC bags have MOLLE straps on the outside. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with MOLLE, it's MOLLE. It's a military kind of looking backpack. It's a series of little 1-inch straps with corresponding horizontal straps. And so if you want to mount two things together, you take the straps of one and kind of interleave them in between the other and snap them closed. All sorts of things can be MOLLE attached on all of the backpacks we've been using in WLPC lately. Have MOLLE on them, either on the side or the front or both. Our USB cases also have MOLLE, so you can put it like an air check is the perfect size for one of the USB cases, and then strap it to the side of your backpack. It has MOLLE straps as well. So what we're thinking for an air check, since you can't or should not be using it inside your backpack because of overheating, we don't want it to heat, has a really big heat sink, but you need the heat sink out where the air is. We came up with this idea to mount a MOLLE strap kit on the back of your Sidekick, and that's what this little plate is.
Yes, and the MOLLE idea is that you can attach the Sidekick through the screw. You will hold it to a plate, and then the plate at the same time is going to be molded into a backpack or some sort of device, even a vest. If you have a vest with a MOLLE system, you can attach it to it and then walk around with the Sidekick exposed. As you said, yes, the Sidekick cannot be put in a bag because it just warms up and overheats and it'll cause damage. So you have to have it exposed. So if you, one of the ideas behind this plate is that the original strap that comes with the Sidekick is just to hold the Sidekick. That's it. But, we all usually carry other things with us. So if we already have a backpack with a MOLLE system and our gear or our stuff inside, why not have the MOLLE and the Sidekick attached to that plate, molded outside of the bag, and you're already doing your job.
And so one of our kits that we had, and we took a bunch of pictures today, and we'll have them up on the WLAN Pros website as well, of if we had an EDC bag, that was the everyday carry bag that was at WLPC last year, and it holds your laptop and your G2 and spare or whatever you need to carry with you, and then now it holds the air check on the outside. So what you do is you put the air check, when you're not using it, in the outside pocket. When you want to use it, you pull it out and use the little screw and just attach it to the outside. So this MOLLE plate is designed to just stay mounted to the outside of your backpack or sling, whatever you're using. It comes in two formats. Now, the reason there's two formats is some backpacks, when you look at the MOLLE system, they have an odd number of MOLLE stripes. Now, they're an inch wide. They're designed that way. Some have a 5 or a 7, and so if you have an odd number of MOLLE, if you'd like to mount this Sidekick plate to it, you need a system that can work with an odd number, and thus we center it up on the middle and it works fine. Other backpacks, like a lot that come from 5.11, they make some great backpacks, tactical bags, have an even number of slots. And if we attached our MOLLE plate to those, it would be shifted and it wouldn't be centered. So we actually offer two different versions of the plate. One is for odds and one's for evens. And one centers on a single for the odds, or centers on a double for the evens. And we've tested them with both styles of backpacks, and they work fine.
Yes, and the backpack we used in Lisbon in our last conference happens to have just 4 sets of stripes. So the one that has a wider set of straps will fit perfect, and it will be centered on that one.
Since it's an even number. And by the way, we've tested these on some really big like Rush 24 bags from 5.11, our EDC bags, sling bags, all sorts of different techniques, different styles. One of the things you mentioned was someone in one of your classes had a Molly vest.
Yes.
And then everything was just attached to his vest.
Yes.
This would be a perfect place to have that as well. Other issues on these little plates. What do you like about them? They're really stiff, by the way. I'm holding one, and you can use it as a fan. It's so stiff.
Yeah.
And you just have to learn one. We could show you the Molly system in a video, but I've never seen a video that actually works. You just have to try it yourself. The interleaving of the straps in between the slots on the base Molly. Once you do it once or twice, you get a feel for it. It makes sense. Taking a picture of it just looks like your fingers are all on the way.
Yeah, it looks like you're all tangled with it and trying to make sense of it. But it's very simple. And I think there are a few videos on the internet that show how to use Molly on YouTube. It's just a modular load carrying case system that allows the device to be put in place that it's just not going to move or swing, or it's just going to be attached to it as part of the bag itself.
And so we just thought Sidekicks, something that's coming. A lot of people like them, want them. Hopefully we'll be shipping more and more. And so if you're someone who has a backpack or a EDC bag or a sling bag with Molly, here's a solution to allow you to use your Sidekick in attached to your bag rather than just on its sling by itself.
Yes, absolutely. And if you happen to have one of the Wireless LAN Professionals custom survey trays that have the Molly system on front, you could as well mount it. I know that the Sidekick is a little bit heavy, but if you're carrying a computer and that's the place where you can mount it, that could also work.
Another place that might work when you're using a survey tray, I've been thinking of coming up a way to mount this Molly tray on the cross straps on your back, and then the Sidekick weight will kind of offset the weight of the laptop in the front, and it won't lean forward so much. So we haven't got that worked out, but coming soon.
Yes, we're always thinking of devices and things that will improve our life out there in the field.
Well, thanks for your time, and thanks for your effort in putting this little plate together for Sidekicks.
Thank you very much.
10 Talks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Come on. All right. I'm GT Hill. So RF interference myths. My history goes way back. I met Devin in 2004, trying to get some certification so I could get work, and kind of worked out since then. Ruckus is the first company I've ever worked for. So that's an accomplishment, I suppose. I'm fully vested for the ladies in the audience. Anyway, so I come across, in teaching and working with Ruckus products, I come across a lot of RF myths. So we're going to interference myths. So we're going to go through those. And for those of you taking pictures of slides, you're going to want to do this, okay? It's high-tech stuff. Myth number 1, Google Glass it. It's worth it. Signals interfere with each other, right? Signals interfere with each other. Signals don't interfere with each other. Do you guys know that? 2 signals running through the air. I'm doing these myths because this is stuff I used to believe. So 2 signals that used to go through the air and hit each other on the same frequency don't interfere. In our mind, we think that, right? We think that they are going to interfere because that's what we're always told. But the reality is that signals don't actually interfere with each other at all. What they do, this animation, I can show you guys how to do that later. Interference is the result of the receiver hearing multiple signals. And that may sound like semantics, but it really isn't. Signals going through the air don't affect each other. How many of you have ever done a point-to-point shot before? Right? Point-to-point outdoor link. You ever worried about crossing, I wasn't going to say swords, signals? Crossing signals? Yeah, crossing the streams. That's much more appropriate. Thank you, Andrew. So if you're worried about crossing, signals don't, right? Signals going through other signals don't affect each other even on the same channel. Myth number 2. I forgot which one it was. Oh yeah. 2 signals received simultaneously or within the same packet of each other results in a collision. We've taught this, we've been told this over and over. If you get two signals, two Wi-Fi transmissions at the same time, that's a collision. The reality is, the truth, is that that is not always the case. Depending on the signal strength, one can actually be viewed as noise. Now, who can tell me what vendor actually uses this fact? Anybody know? It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. Maru. So Maru actually knows that when they're on one single channel, they actually have some pretty smarts in there that can say, I'm going to transmit on AP number 1 at channel 1, and AP number 2 at channel 1, and if my clients are far enough apart, the resulting signal-to-noise ratio between the two will be acceptable. For example, here we have 20 dB of signal-to-noise ratio. Hey, that'll work. Even 2 packets. Now, I have the privilege of working with a guy named Victor Strom. If you've never heard the name, he's one of the co-founders of Ruckus. So I'm in love with that guy, right? I hope it's being recorded. I love the dude. And I was talking to him about this, and he started going into how at Ruckus we have meetings about which thresholds when an incoming inbound signal, whether you should abandon. So let's say you're listening to me, and you all of a sudden have Devin starts talking, which should you choose? The answer is Devin, of course. But there is actual logic that is put into, each vendor has to go through this. You actually go in and you have to say, here's what. Is that time left or time spent? Perfect, okay. Is that vendors have to make this choice. When should I abandon the original signal and switch and pick up the new? So if you're in the middle and all of a sudden you start hearing the preamble of a new packet, what do you do with that? And that's a decision that vendors have to make when they're building their products. Myth number 3. Low frequencies travel farther. Been told this a lot, right? Low frequencies always go farther. The truth is that all frequencies travel the exact same distance through free space. So all signals travel through free space equally. There's no difference in attenuation among frequencies, like we've always thought. So where does that come from? Free space path loss. That's this math problem that we've done before, either online or you've had to go through the math, that tells you that when you say that 5 gigahertz doesn't go as far as 2.4, there's actually 2 factors in FSPL calculation that does that. One is the inverse square law. For every 2 times the distance, you're down to 25% of your power. You lose 6 dB. That's fairly standard, light, RF energy, whatever. Here's the other one though. Antenna aperture. So what is antenna aperture? First, let's take an Arkansas cell phone, which is called a CB radio, at 27 megahertz, right? I was actually going to bring one, but I didn't. So a CB radio antenna, very low frequency. If you're gonna build an antenna, if you've ever seen the trucks here in Texas, right? We're in Texas, you've seen the trucks with the antennas on them? They're really tall. The taller they are, the manlier you are. So you have these really big antennas, and then you contrast that to 802.11 AN and AC with 5 gigahertz. And if you were to build these antennas to the same spec, let's just say quarter wavelength, right? That's a somewhat simple way to build an antenna. That when you do that, the physical size of the antenna is different. Well, we all know that. You can see that from cell radios to your phone to the TV antenna you may have in your house. That antennas are built for that. But if you think about it, which one is going to receive more signal? The big antenna or the small antenna? The fully vested antenna? The big antenna aperture is nothing more than it's got more surface area to receive the signal. It's just bigger, right? Given the same frequency, the same design, lower frequency antennas are physically larger. Anything bigger gives you more signal. If you have bigger ears, you hear better, right? Anybody remember old C-band satellite dishes? I had one growing up. If you had an 11 or 12 foot dish like we did, pimpin', right? The people with the 8-foot dish didn't get as good a signal. Same frequency, different aperture size. So when you look at free space path loss calculation, you will see that inside of that, do the wiki page on it, it's really helpful. It will say, keep in account that the aperture size is the other factor and the frequency dependent factor. The last myth is one of my favorites. You can achieve same band radio isolation with antenna design, even if that antenna design is omnidirectional. Let's see if anyone knows where I'm going. Okay? so Blake's on board. So let's imagine you have an access point with multiple radios in the same frequency, okay? Hypothetically, let's say someone did that. Then you could say, hey, look, maybe we can isolate between these with some sort of antenna design that's actually omnidirectional. You can't have both. In fact, every vendor, including Ruckus, we want a multi-radio same band AP. It makes a lot of sense to do that and deploy that for many reasons. But there is physics involved in doing that. The truth is, in order to get that kind of isolation, it requires some heavy-duty systems. So again, I was at headquarters one day, and I was talking to this guy, Rich Hudnut, super sharp RF guy, and he had this big metal block in his hand. I was like, what's that? He said, it's called a cavity filter. So if you want to run radio A right next to radio B, both in 5 gigahertz, let's say, for example, if you run those just normal out of the box, they destroy each other. Anybody who's ever put 2 APs too close together and run a test before has experienced that. An antenna design to date has not been shown to be able to isolate properly. To isolate, you actually need something that looks like that. This is actually physically like 2 pounds as an input and an output. And if you want to adjust the channel, you physically turn screws to do it. In fact, I can give you some inside info, right? What if you put some motors on one of these and you want to change frequencies? You push a button and these motors turn this thing to go to a different channel. That's what it would actually take to properly isolate between multiple 5 gigahertz radios, or any radios for that matter. These are used all the time in other technologies. In Wi-Fi, it's cost prohibitive. It's just physically a huge problem to be able to do it. So that's why today you don't see anybody that is capable of doing it. It's not that the technology isn't there, it's that the cost just never makes sense to do it. And I have 5 seconds left. Bam!
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.